Hi everybody, this is Lee. With this video, I'm talking about Rosa Parks and how you can never be Rosa Parks. I can't be Rosa Parks. You can't be Rosa Parks. There's only one. You can use her as a role model. You can aspire to be similar to her. You can never be her. There's only one. She was fantastic. She was Black Girl Magic. Many times on this channel, I've spoken of Black Girl Magic. I talk about my six icons, the women that I hold in high esteem that operated at the very outer edge of their capabilities, and that they were super women. Let's see. Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Ida B. Wells, Fannie Lou Hamer, Shirley Chisholm, and Barbara Jordan. And that they did very fantastic things. Some of them held public office, but most of them didn't. That even within the confines and boundaries and efforts to subjugate them, both for being African American and for being female, that they defied the expectations and constraints placed on them by the greater community. The efforts to subdue them, to break their spirits, to subjugate them, and use them for economic wealth, but they defied that and rose up in stature and power and shook this nation to its very foundations, not only from a social, cultural, and political point of view, but also economically. And I think many people forget that the slave system that operated in North America was a capital system. It was a capitalist system. It was an economic system. Any act against it, any defiance against it, the dismantling of the racist attitudes that supported it, these are forms of economic justice, and that continues today, even with the slave system still in place, slavery by another name, as outlined by Michelle Alexander, the criminal justice system. And so, criminal justice reform, racial justice are a form of economic justice. But back to Rosa Parks and why you can never be Rosa Parks. She was more than the sum of her parts. She was a symbol, and therefore she lives forever. And that was the power, that she was a symbol. She wasn't just a woman, she was a symbol of freedom. And for that, she still lives today. And that many people just don't understand that it was more than just an act of civil disobedience, her refusal to relinquish her seat. And that people seem to think, well, I'm sitting down and I'm not going to get up. Therefore, I must be Rosa Parks. No, it takes more than that. Rosa Parks had a history of activism prior to her act of civil disobedience that started the Montgomery bus boycott. Now, she was active with the NAACP. She had been trained as an activist. She actually attended a school to learn how to be a citizen activist. Not in the Hillary Clinton sense, but in the real sense, citizen activism. And that she worked with the NAACP. In fact, that she was very aware of the state that she lived in, Alabama, and what could happen to her being a woman and an African American woman at that if she'd been caught up in the criminal justice system, the things that could be done to her, and that had been done to others who were active in the civil rights movement. And that her work with the NAACP actually involved investigations of sexual assault and rape of African American women in the South, which was something that happened during Jim Crow, still happening today, but certainly during Jim Crow, that African American women were assaulted, raped, sexually abused, and that there is a book called The Dark End of the Street that outlines the very prevalence of it. And the fact that there were also lynchings going on. It was a form of terrorism against Black people in the North American South during the Jim Crow era. And that Rosa Parks went and interviewed these women and tried to get justice for them. There could have been violence against her, And we know from Ida B. Wells that she actually had to relocate from the South up to Chicago because of her investigations of lynching, which she discovered had their origin not necessarily in racial hatred, but actually had their origin in economic jealousy and greed. That these lynchings and terrorism, rapes used against the black community was a form of economic subjugation. The burnings of black towns, the lootings, the terrorism, it was economic motivation. So anyway, Rosa Parks investigated that, putting herself in danger when she did that. Again, uh, Ida B. Wells actually had to relocate from the South to Chicago in order to escape repercussions of her investigations. But Rosa Parks was maybe quiet in demeanor, but she had a strong will. And so she did those investigations. She was active in the civil rights movement. She agreed to be a symbol, an icon, the flashpoint for the civil rights movement, the Montgomery bus boycott. She was also friends and a contemporary of Fannie Lou Hamer, and so she was aware of the treatment that Fannie Lou Hamer received in her efforts to register people to vote. That Fannie Lou Hamer was beaten, arrested, and then beaten while she was in jail. And so things happened to Black women for their efforts to dismantle apartheid system of economic injustice in the South. But Rosa Parks agreed to do that. Prior to her act of civil disobedience and refusing to relinquish her seat in the colored section of the bus to a white passenger, there were other people who did similar acts of civil disobedience. They are listed out, but I'm going to also point out the fact that, like Claudette Colvin, that there were others around the same time period, but we can go even further back that not only these women also performed acts of civil disobedience, but also Fannie Lou Hamer did that, and that also Ida B. Wells did that, and not Rosa Parks, but Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth. They all attempted to integrate public transportation, not planes, trains. And then other forms of transport that they refused to give up their seats. So there's always someone that comes before, but it was Rosa Parks that became the symbol. And that she gave up quite a bit. She didn't do it for a payout from the company that ran the buses. She did it because it was the right thing to do. It was to be done. And in fact, just the opposite happened, that after her act of defiance, where she said, I will continue to sit here. And then the police came and she complied with the police who escorted her off the bus. Fortunately, she was not abused in prison, but she did receive death threats. She received, she was put on a blacklist, an economic blacklist. She lost her job, and her husband lost his job. They were not able to work in that region. They actually had to relocate from Alabama north to Michigan so that they could work again. And so it wasn't just that she sat down. She became a symbol, and she knew full well the danger that she put herself in when she did that, and she did it anyway. Not just to get, again, a payout, not just to, because she was tired. She knew what would happen to her being active in the civil rights movement, voting rights activism. She knew what could happen, the results, and so she did it anyway. Also, the fact that she continued her work, that she didn't just do this one act and then it was over, that she continued to work. She worked for John Conyers, the longest serving member of the United States House. She was his receptionist and secretary and assisted him with getting elected. And that she was also involved with housing discrimination work, that kind of activism. That she also worked with the Black Power movement. She also worked with the freeing of political prisoners, advocating for them. So again, Rosa Parks was more than a sum of her parts. She was a flashpoint. She was a symbol. She was the first lady of the civil rights movement. She was the a very epitome, the flashpoint, the motivation behind the civil rights movement. And because of this, she is celebrated. She also was a target for retribution from those who felt like this should not have been done. But she endured. She endured that. And for that reason, she's Black Girl Magic, and that no one else can be her ever. That we can aspire to be as brave as she was, that we can be as determined or try to be. But she is the only Rosa Parks. No one else can be her. For that reason, she's Black Girl Magic. Good luck.